Maybe. Hello. I was just getting worried. Maybe everybody's, oh, it looks like we got Rebecca and Elizabeth joining us remotely. Okay. Yeah. I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Is it recording? I'm gonna call the button. Recording. I think it is recording. It's recording. All right. Thanks, Shannon. Now we can get started. All right, it is 5:32 on Thursday, March 28th. I'd like to call the Lawrence Community Shelter Board of Directors regular meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Does everybody have a chance to look at it? My only change, I just kind of realized earlier today, our next regular board meeting is the 25th of April, not the 18th of April. So on the future agenda items, that should say April 25, not April 18th. Any other changes to the agenda? Not entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes. I guess I could share the agenda. For anybody out there. Okay. The first item on our regular agenda is the financial report. And is Karen online? Karen, are you prepared to give the financial report? Maybe I need to confirm. Can everybody?
I think you have to admit her.
Admit all, sorry. I need a tech support. All right. I think that's better. Is everybody here now? Sorry, we got the meeting started and I hadn't invited or admitted everybody into the meeting room. All we've accomplished so far is approval of the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the financial report. Karen, are you ready to provide that?
Yes.
All right.
All right.
And I can pull up our financial statements. So I don't know how you want to go through this. I'll just queue up
Well, would you allow me to share my screen and then, because I've got a couple of other things that I'd like to show you guys.
Yep. Go ahead.
All right. It says I don't have permission. Oh, well, you're screen sharing anyway.
I'll stop that.
There we go. Okay, so. All right, so for February, we landed at about 400,000 in cash. And that's between all of our accounts. We did add some equipment, but it's not on our balance sheet because it needs to be reclassed. So I'll have to get with Kindred on that. Not too many liabilities, but there's accounts payable on there now because I've been entering the invoices now. So we have a clearer picture of what things look like. Only long-term liability we have is, again, the loan with Lawrence. So yeah, total liabilities, net assets at $3,388,000. All right. So I have notes. All right, so donations are down quite a bit. Year to date, it's about half. I don't know if there was like a fundraising campaign last year where, you know, people could donate through the web or whatever. But we're down quite a bit. We're still up in terms of grants by quite a bit. But then you'll see in our operating expenses that there were big jumps. So my notes say that for facility, year to date, and even just last month, 37,000 of that was the equipment purchase that needs to be on the balance sheet. And that was for cameras for the shelter. And then there were a whole bunch of shelter updates that were happening in January and February. A lot of those bills were paid in February. Let's say about 36,000 also in shelter updates to get it livable, I suppose. And then we had some more administrative expenses. For one, because I'm not on payroll, I'm considered an other professional service. Trying to get the foundation set for the next person that's coming in, unless you guys want me on. But there's that. Then we had to pay for the 2022 audit, which we went over at the last board meeting. And then there was bargaining unit expenses. So that's why we had higher expenses there. Cash flow still looks pretty good year to date. I would look at it that way, even though we really had a down February. So let's look at our budget to actual. So for February, we spent a lot of money. We spent a lot of money compared to how much money we brought in. But again, year to date, we're still looking pretty good, I think. As of, so first couple pages of budget versus actual are of just February. The last couple of pages are year to date. So net income for the year, we're still at 327,000. So I think that's pretty, we're sitting good. Even though it looked bad, we're sitting good. So I wanted to show you a couple of things because payroll, that was the other thing that I didn't hit on. Payroll was also really significant. And I thought I would demonstrate why for you guys. So in blue is hours worked, and in green is gross pay. It's by job title. In 2023, at this point in the year, there were only 30 employees. For this year, at the end of February, we had 53 employees. So the hours worked and the gross pay is going to be a lot different. I think this considers all of the, well, this is just what we paid to these job titles. So pretty significant variance. I think we said 95,000 difference between last year and this year at this point. That's why we had 23 more people working this year. Okay, the other thing I wanted to share with you is in terms of revenues. So budgeted revenues, we have 571,000, 572,000, I guess. And we are over that by 233, again, because of the grants. And then for expenses, budgeted amount nets with the revenues that's budgeted, so it's just 0. So year to date, we're under about 120,000. But the year to date outlook, 352,000. And we can see that on the cash flow statement. Let's go back. Okay, I think this is what I was talking about. We could see that here. Income from operations, and we're down considering depreciation. And I think there was another expense, but we're sitting good. So again, net income for the year, 327,000. Did you guys have any questions?
Any questions from the board?
I guess, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into little piggy things in here, but, for instance, I'm looking at the fundraising credit card processing fees that were running, a little over double what we had expected, but meanwhile, the fundraising was below what was expected. I realize part of this probably is just that we didn't have a good basis for establishing the budget. Would that make sense? That we really, some of these items are being thrown into play without it having a historical reference to base the budget on.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been working on this month has been trying to dissect how we get charged our credit card fees, where these fees are coming from. I've been successful at getting 2 out of 3 things that I requested from our credit card processor. From Every Action is our CRM website, the customer resource management for all of the donors. So that's been a pain because, again, my role coming in is to kind of establish that the foundation. And as you said, a lot of things that are in play right now weren't in play last year. We didn't know, that we were going to be doing all of this work.
So are you saying, I guess I'm curious if the credit card processing fees are being coded to the appropriate account, or if we're just being charged more for those processing fees than we were a year ago? The total donations is lower. So
Yeah.
That our processing fees for the credit card used for the donations would also be lower.
Yeah, I'll look into that to see if it's just something that needs to be reclassed. So I know that there was a couple of reclasses that we need to do. Also, in terms of tracking, I know the city would like us to break out expenses directly related to the village. So I've asked Kindred to show us that. I do have a question for the board. Since I'm going to be doing all these reclasses anyway, do you guys want to see all of the updates to the shelter in a separate account?
Meaning facility, when you say updates, meaning?
I mean, the upgrades like new flooring, paint, bathrooms, so I don't think they need to be under a separate account.
Okay.
I do think, as you've described, like, this is above budget because of these investments in upgrading the facility. I think I just appreciate having the notes that go with the financial report so we can understand why is it different from what we budgeted.
Well, in some of those, with the larger amounts, I think as I realized it was a draft proposal, but it seems like the board is required to, sign off on some of the expenses greater than, I'm losing track of where we are, 25,000 on some of them perhaps.
25,000.
The accounting policies and procedures
Mhm.
draft. So, I think as long as we're in alignment with the policies and procedures, I don't know that we need to go into a whole lot of additional detail.
Right.
Okay.
Is it your thought that maybe these are more one-off events or costs and we should kind of create a separate account to put them there, so we're not budgeting it going forward?
Yeah, so one of the things in our accounting policies has our capitalization policy, which I think it had it at like anything over $1,000 would be capitalized. But I don't think that that's beneficial for the shelter, especially since de minimis safe harbor is anything above $2,500. So I've updated our accounting policies to show that. I think for me, the shelter, it's kind of hard. Like the new flooring in place would be considered a capital improvement to the building. So that's a depreciable expense because we've improved the asset of the building. So there's a whole bunch of those kinds of things that I've got to like figure out if we want to move it from the income statement to the balance sheet, and then the depreciation would hit the income statement like it does for all of our other assets.
I think we're in your hands. I mean, if your recommendation is to do it that way, that's gonna make sense going forward over the long term, then I
Okay.
think that would probably be the way to go. I was misunderstanding what you first asked then. So you're basically asking if it needs to be capitalized, not if we need to have a new account.
Well, I
Or-
thought maybe with all the things going on, perhaps you wanted to see it in a separate account. So like what
Mhm.
I'm showing here on my spreadsheet is like our general ledger broken out by accounts. And then when you see it on prepared financial statements, they're kind of dumped into one bucket
Right,
for each of these things. So I guess I wanted to know if you wanted to know that like the painting and some of these other expenses that we had for going into improving the shelter, if you wanted to just see that as like a 2024 shelter improvement item, that it can be expensed because it's under the $2,500 threshold, or if we want to just lump them into capital improvements.
I would think that since it's something that is not on a regular, basis for us, that it might help to have it on a separate account in a general ledger. So it's easy for us to spot that when it comes to budgeting in the future. That seems
Okay.
like it might be, I don't want to speak for everyone, but that seems like it might help us not have to go back and to the weeds and look at what all those expenses were in that. So
yeah, that's the value I could see in separating it.
Okay, all right, so I'll go through, just as an FYI, going back and reclassing, I think what Kindred does is that when they close the month, they close the month. So the reclass might just hit in March.
Okay,
You might see there like big swings there because of those reclasses. So, just as a warning.
yeah,
Can I interject one thing about when Karen mentioned the expenses for the village? She wanted to do a separate item, is that we have an obligation to spend a certain amount of the funding toward the village.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we're keeping track of when we reach that mark. And so that's when we started talking about itemizing and putting a separate line item to be able to track and do that, so.
So James, when you say the village, you're talking about Monarch Village?
No,
No.
You're
the
talking
village is what the city's referring to, the pilot shelter village.
Because in our contract, part of the funding, I think it was 1.5, must be spent for the village.
Mhm.
And that's what we're keeping track of. So as an agency, we do all payroll. We have separated. HR has went into our payroll system and separated out and developed another class of employee to have the village separate so we can see how much is going for payroll for the village and versus the shelter. So that'll go to that 1.5, even though it's all the money, but we're just keeping track of how much we spend there so we can meet the obligations. So we don't get heavy on one side and she brought the outforce. So we don't get heavy on one side and, we lose track of what we're spending. Ellie, I appreciate it. No,
Well, I,
But you did do it.
I borrowed.
Oh, yeah, you can take it back. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
You did great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You did
The
great.
next time you go there.
Go team.
Next time.
Go team. Thank you.
I guess one other question, in looking at this on the revenue end, and again, it may be of no consequence, but it looked like that we had budgeted about $20,000 in grants for both the community development and the ESG grant that are not showing up as being received. Are those grants not part of the funding for us for this year, or are we just off cycle on those?
I believe, I know we have 32,000 for ESG and rapid housing. I'm not sure what the shelter amount was because I think it's been spent already. Karen, do you show how much we have for ESG total? I know that's.
I don't, because that's one of those things where I'm still learning about the shelter. And I've dumped all of the grants into this grants government city of Lawrence or Douglas County. So it should all be in that bucket. I will need to go back and
I think it's around maybe 20,000 or something for shelter. And it wouldn't be hard to find out what that is.
Well, no, I mean, just that explanation there. I mean, certainly the overall grant revenue is increased. I just was wanting to make sure that we weren't lacking something that was putting a greater burden on the funding from either the county or the city, but it seems like to hear that they're probably dumped into that bucket makes sense.
Yep. And that's just another one of those things where, okay, I could reclass it also. I have to go in. I told Charlie, I said, please be patient with me. I've got a whole laundry list of things that I've got to provide to you guys.
And you have a full-time job.
Yeah. And we're working in public accounting full time. So it's tax season.
So this is that's why we contracted with her. She's got a full-time job doing this and contracted with her to do this.
You've been wonderful.
You have been,
what you've
Karen.
done. So,
Thank you. So yeah, I work during the day doing taxes, and then at night I do shelter things. So.
All right, any other questions?
I had a couple of questions, just real kind of understanding a little bit about the operating expenses and the significant difference between the two. So I just pulled a few out and kind of wondering what that looks like going forward. And maybe a little clarity on why there's such significant difference from last year to this year, especially on things that are direct assistance. So for food, we had budgeted 23,000. Our actual expenses was 8,000. That's significantly different from a year, and I'm just kind of curious as to were there donations in that? Food has only gotten more expensive in the last year, at least for me, and my family, and the needs that we have. So I was curious about that difference. Where was the food coming from? If they were donated, if it was something else that we were able to have as feeding our folks. Also, I had a question about the Wi-Fi. We had budgeted for quite a significantly less amount that we paid. And I'm curious about how Wi-Fi could be paid in the future. I know that our USDS, well, our 497 school district has a contract where they receive discount Wi-Fi for students and faculty. I'm wondering if that could be a possibility we explore with the city and the county's assistance with that, so that we can maybe break that down to be more of a fee that's not absorbed. Like $14,000 quite a bit. I imagine that's also for the pallet shelter too. But maybe not. That's why I'm asking for clarity. And then for gasoline, there was, we had budgeted a little over, well, 1,600 for it, and we only paid out $167. So those to me stick out, especially as we're building operating expenses and we're wondering about what it is that are definite needs and what are something that we could, look at being very significantly different in the next year in 2025. So could you give me a little bit of an understanding of why food, was significantly different from what we budgeted? A little bit of a clarity about Wi-Fi and how we could look at that in the future. And then, why was gasoline so much different from what we had budgeted for last year?
So for food, part of that is rollover from 2023. So trying to play catch up with bills that were past due. So that's part of it. The other aspect is, I think we did get a donation. And by the way, I totally forgot to highlight to you guys we didn't have in-kind donations on last year's budget or in actuals. So what I've done now is taken any discounts on invoices and put that into in-kind. So we have some of that. I do need to also figure out what the volunteer in-kind value should be, so that's also included in there. And then you mentioned Wi-Fi. For facility, computer, internet, IT, that's a really all-encompassing bucket. So for that, I want to say that there was like wiring for the village, like the cat cables, cat 5 cabling to wire for the village, and then new computers, new things like that. So if you guys would like to see that broken out further, I'd be happy to try and get that done, accomplished for you guys anyway. Because I do think in terms of the buckets that are available, it would be more helpful for you to see things separated out rather than it just being, okay, for computer and then like contracted services or Wi-Fi or, whatever. Like the gas, electric, water, trash probably could be a lot better in terms of being separated out. So you guys just let me know what you would like to see and I'll make it happen.
So won't that be sorted out a little bit because some of those were for the village anyways? One-time expenses for the village?
Yes. Yeah. I think in terms of like the computer and internet, because again, I need to go back and reclass some of these things. We should be able to see exactly what we spent in terms of like new upgrades and in terms of like facility, computer, internet, IT things for the village versus just the shelter.
I don't think a lot of the internet and Wi-Fi are costs at the village. A lot of those costs are probably coming from the shelter.
I'm thinking, didn't R&R come out and do the cabling? And that was probably for security cameras?
They did, but that's the city works for R&R also.
Yeah.
We just added some cameras, but I'm pretty sure that I don't think that comes under our budget for the cameras. maybe the additional ones do, but a lot of the, internet and networking is for the new cameras we have at the
Right.
shelter. So they had to upgrade our network to do the cameras. A lot of the staff that came on these new computers, there was a lot of things that needed to be upgraded for our existing staff and new staff. So
Yeah.
those are some of the costs that we're seeing right now. As far as Christina, when you said the budget, I really can't attest to what was done before or what the budget was before, but all the costs that are coming out, like, Karen had said, when we started trying to figure out what we're looking at, there was, a lot of bills and a lot of things that needed to be sorted through, and it's taken these 2 months to do some of those things. And right now, we're developing a system to where we can actually get the bills, all the bills, and see the bills, and actually be able to catalog what we're getting and what we're paying and who we're paying to. We're still going through some of those things.
I'm also thinking, so the board, basically, I have to approve all the accounts payable now, and that wasn't a practice last year. The practice last year was to use a checkbook, write checks out, that was the end of it. And so now there's a process that's more standard in most organizations where the accountant prepares all the checks. Checks have to be reviewed and authorized before they're signed and sent out. So that's why like the R&R check came through, I saw that, it was a big one. I made the assumption that was probably for the security camera system, because it takes cabling for those cameras to be connected and powered. So I feel like maybe part of this is just how do we provide the right documentation when we do our financial report review, so that you're feeling like, oh, this makes sense, right?
Yeah.
What-
And I kind of feel like too, like, the operation is so radically different this year than last year. And I mean, I consider this our reset year, so that next
I
year
mean,
we'll have
yeah.
some idea about how to run such an expanded operation.
Right,
Because I don't really know that it's,
and I think a lot of these costs right now are not gonna be costs we'll have next year.
yeah.
Because it really is trying to, like, adjust things to how they need to be situated for the future.
That's understandable too about the Wi-Fi and some of the other miscellaneous items, but for the food, I'm just curious about that.
Well, I think as I recall, the answer to that would be that, we were trying to put together a budget to satisfy the city, deadlines
Okay.
and for getting everything finalized last fall. And the expectation was that we would be providing 3 meals a day for 200 people, something like that. And
Yeah, I think
so
we,
it's like, boom, where are we gonna come up with that?
Yeah.
What's a reasonable number for that? And I don't think we've come close to doing that at this,
right,
so far this year.
no, you're right, and I think when we tweaked on that budget, we scaled that number down, but it was still just a mathematical, like, this many dollars for this many people times this many meals times this many days.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
And so it was one of the,
I think it was a realistic number for that,
yeah,
that scenario, but we haven't met that scenario.
right. And I also think, like, when I presented to the city commission, I identify here are some areas that are, I would say, are uncertain, and the food budget was one of those. And it wasn't clear if we would, like, really have food operations at the level we were thinking might be necessary, and if we did, it might actually cost us more than we budgeted, so.
We're gonna see more.
Right.
And we're just starting to get ramped up. We're also in the process of identifying where all of our sources of supplies come from. So we've hired a kitchen manager, and I'm going ahead, but I'll talk about that more when I do my report about who we hired and some of the transitions we made from old systems to what we're looking at doing new.
Any other questions about the financial report?
Quick question, that's gonna be, is there an easy system in place to itemize food for pallet versus food for a shelter? Because that seems like that's gonna be a nightmare if you're gonna have to split the two.
We can, probably do it by meal served. And
Okay.
that, as far as sorting it out before we serve, that would really be hard. But we can do it on the back end and say, this is how many meals we served today and do a food cost that way. I mean, our chef that's what he does, because we talk food costs and how many people served and things like that. So we could do something like that.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'd like a motion to accept the February financial reports.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded to accept our February 2024 financial reports. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed, say nay. Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes. Thanks, Karen. Now, the next item on the agenda, I believe, is the, let me pull it up again. The draft financial policies. I don't want to put a lot of time on this today, but I wanted to basically put it out there. We need to kind of agree on what our process is gonna be to approve these. And since we just got them, this seemed premature to try to approve anything tonight. What I'd like is if people can review them and provide feedback in the next 2 weeks, then the exec committee can take that feedback and make any modifications and then hopefully have it back to us at the April board meeting. Does that seem fair enough? So a couple weeks, so I just put a date, April 11, but the exec committee meets on Mondays, so really by that, probably Monday, whatever the 13th, 14th is. And then we'll work with Karen to finish making any changes that need to be made and then bring that back.
Okay, so again, I had made notes of a handful of different questions and some of the titles of who is responsible and things like that. So just basically put that into a single document question and submit.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be super. And then I think I said Thursday, April 11, if that works for everyone, but it's not a firm deadline. The exec committee will meet on the 15th and then figure at that point, that would give Karen some time to see the feedback, see the questions, and then she could make whatever changes that she thinks are necessary. And then,
I did add a whole bunch of comments to the Word document, so you should be able to respond to them too, and also add your own comments or make changes directly on there as well.
okay. The document that I sent out though is that probably is disconnected to anything you're doing further, Karen.
Perhaps. So when you open it, it doesn't have any comments or anything like that.
Well, I saved what you did and sent that out, so.
Okay.
I think one of the other considerations is our board is required to comply with the Open Meetings Act. And so if we really can't use a document to have a dialogue about the document, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So that process needs to be, less interactive.
Okay.
I think the simplest way to do it is everybody sends me their feedback questions and we get that compiled, submitted to you. And then exec committee can review how you responded or rehashed it, and then hopefully bring a fairly complete document to the next board meeting. So I know that's a little bit awkward process, but we have to be transparent as much as we can.
I know we're gonna review this, but real quick, just so I can get some clarity on what I'm reviewing and talking about. I see that in this report, there's like, red slash lines through, that means that's null and void, so there's no petty cash fund. That we have as far as the consideration in the policies, the accounting policies and procedures, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think it would be difficult to have a petty cash fund on site, especially given the nature of the shelter's history in the last couple of years. So, and I've strict through a whole bunch of things on there just to show you guys what was there and the changes that I'm proposing to update more what we're doing now and in like the direction that we're moving in terms of building that or strengthening our accounting foundation that wasn't there before.
Okay, thank you for that clarity, just wanted to be sure.
So does that process work for everyone? Any questions? All right, then we'll move on to the next item. Thank you so much, Karen.
You're welcome. I'll have to hop off. So if you guys have any
Okay.
other questions, let me know.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. James, Executive Director report.
How's everybody tonight?
Good.
I wanted to start off with the introduction of my Deputy Director, Kim Bravitz. Kim Bravitz has a lot of experience and we've worked together for years doing ESG. And I'll let Kim introduce herself. And this is the board.
I'm Kim Kravitz. I have worked in Kansas off and on for almost 20 years. So, and I've worked with James over 15 of those. So, I've done rapid rehousing. I've also worked with many populations, and I will say working with homeless population and those that are in shelter is my passion. And so I'm really excited to be there.
Well, welcome, Kim.
Well, thank you.
And so,
When did you start?
Last Monday, I keep having to remind you, I've only been there like 8 days. Oh my
a lot of things happened on 18th.
God.
So, and one of the questions that I was going to pose in regards to our accounting policy and procedures was having to do with definitions. And so I'm seeing the deputy director, and then there's like an administrative assistant to the director, is that right? And where do those responsibilities blend or separate, or how are those roles different? I'm just looking.
Yeah, the deputy director and administrative assistant.
Yeah,
Well, our administrative assistant will be in charge of organizing our office operations. One of the things that we have now, there's nobody that keeps track of schedules, mail coming in, just a centralized office person to do those things. That's what our administrative assistant do. She's actually on family bereavement leave right now. She's gonna be helping with some of the donor things, with some fundraising, helping me stay organized on a lot of my schedule, scheduling community meetings and engagements. So she's well versed at doing some things. She's great at doing those things. She's from Lawrence, so she knows a lot of the people that we're working with and some of the organizations, so that's what she'll do. Deputy director is gonna be in charge of programming, so she's going to be working with our direct line staff, which is case managers, shelter managers, DSAs. That's who she'll be supervising. We'll both co-supervise, our kitchen manager, and right now I'm supervising the village. And I'll talk about staffing, that was on my list to talk about staffing and do some of those things. So Kim's gonna be in charge, directly responsible for programming and managing the way our programs function with our guests.
thanks.
So, you wanna give a discussion program?
I will say too, I've worked with Catholic Charities for over 10 years, so I'm pretty familiar with Florence, because we had an office here, so, I kind of wrote down the vision of where I see us going in the, I hope, next 3 months. And one of those is to really enhance the shelter to be welcoming to guests. So some of the projects that we have started doing is really, we started with a very deep clean, that started my first day, which includes like item storage, how long we're keeping storage for individuals, and when they need to check in. We have a lot of items that I'm not sure we've seen those guests in years, so started there and really looking at our inventory. I think that's something our administrative assistant will help as well. We don't have a system in place to really inventory office supplies and things that we might need to replenish for guests. And then we're also doing the total clean, high to low, which has been an interesting experience so far. I think they're in there several times.
The dust set off the fire.
Yeah, and they had some equipment failure, and so, but I think they're on it now. They've almost finished the new 90-day area. So, and then they'll be moving on, I think back to the warehouse. We've kind of staged that out so that they'll be in areas that won't disrupt programming at the time that they're doing it. And then we're, of course, upgrading and remodeling the bathrooms that are in the 90-day program and looking at, what we need to kind of finish off that space before we start enrolling people. And the Monarch. So this is something we have not gotten to quite yet, but it's next on my task is repairs and then really deep cleaning our Monarch units. I've done inspections and I have background with construction and maintenance and across the board. Our Monarch units are not meeting what I would say code right now. So if it was somebody I was moving into rapid rehousing or any 90-day program, I would not pass some of the units that we have. So we're looking at what needs to be done, kind of getting some bids on what that would look like. We have some old units that on schedule to get those cleaned out and cleaned up. The other thing I really want to focus on is starting case management early to ensure that our guests are getting the services they need. Some of the things that we've already had in place include, our partnership with Lawrence Douglas County Health Department, and they're coming out, I think, every Wednesday. Is it health?
They're last Wednesdays of the month.
Okay, last Wednesdays of the month, still getting to know the schedule. RADAC, Salvation Army is bringing food to the village 3 times a week, so I think that's a new partnership we have with them. It's much, okay. And then, of course, working closely with Burt Nash, as I think most of our guests have some kind of relationship with Burt Nash already. And then for me, the ultimate goal is to really provide opportunities for stable and permanent housing for everyone that comes into the shelter. And while that's a large goal, I think it's something that I will be reviewing our policies and procedures for operations or just within programming to look at what's working and what's not working and looking at the experience I've had in running some of the programs, one of which is our rapid rehousing program. So you're not seeing income coming in because we're not spending it quite yet. But we did have a meeting today on rapid rehousing, and I think we have 4 possible applications. So looking at getting them enrolled, we'll get them enrolled and start looking for landlords and apartments for them. But you'll see, I think, some of the case management dollars reflected hopefully next month as we really tighten up that process and get more training on kind of what that looks like, including me, because things have changed, including the HMIS system. So, but we have almost all of our case, I think all of our case management team will be doing some of rapid rehousing. So, we're rearranging a lot of things in the shelter, so it will look quite different, I think, in the next month.
That's really good to hear, and welcome, Kim. I'm wondering, as you talk about programming, and I know there's, deep cleansing going on. I'm curious to know if your programming also includes, some of the development or like the, education and in-staff training or training that has to do with preventive education, as it relates to any trauma-informed work. I know that we have gotten a couple of requests to come in. I work with State Care Center, so we also do preventative education, bystander intervention training, those things that help to form a strong or like a comfortable, a safe, or at least trauma-informed and environment for folks. I'm wondering if you were the one who, we would need to be making that touch point with, or, and what, yeah, and what are your goals for that kind of staffing and development as it comes to education?
So I've been looking at kind of some of the training that we have in place and making notes of things that I think we need to implement, trauma-informed care being one. I taught trauma-informed care for quite some time in Johnson County. I think that's one that we really need. A lot of development for some of our new staff, which would include just basic case management. We're doing a training, with Wally Kurtz, I said his name right, who I love and have had him when I went to KU, but person-centered plan. So that'll be a good baseline, I think, for us to start educating some of our case managers. For some of them, it's the first time they've done case management. And I have a ton of experience in case management, so really supporting them and their development. I meet with all the case managers, have it scheduled for next week, and one of the things I will do is look at kind of where they are and what requests they have for development opportunities. But I have a long list of things I think that we need to implement either on our onboarding or have as once a year training, just to enhance our services. Some of the things I think with onboarding are just safety precautions, first aid, CPR, bloodborne pathogens, and just, how to use PPE and when to use it. And that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like, being not just trauma informed, I know that that is a popular term, but sex trafficking or things like that would help to determine the guests, and as far as their, it could actually be significantly stronger to understand their success in gaining and maintaining the agency of holding their own households or being
Right.
Positioned to be fully stable and housed. So, yeah, we'll keep in touch and I'll contact you. I know that we guys
That'd be
were
great.
talking about that, but that was quite a few months ago, but we'll kind of make those connections.
I think some education too on just mental health disorders and what that looks like and how de-escalation techniques and things would be very helpful for our staff, especially, I think James will talk about having new staff that we have. And so, for some of our younger case management team, I think that would be awesome.
Thank you.
Our, person-centered case management training is scheduled for, I believe, April 9th, and that's gonna be, a training offered citywide. There's other organizations, attending that training. We've got all of our case managers signed up to do that. So that's gonna be one of our first steps to the transition to education for our staff. One of the things we've identified, one is that our staff haven't been in this field long, and two, that they're young and they're passionate, but they need that background, educational background, so we're gonna start doing it. I think the next training that I want to get scheduled will be de-escalation, how to effectively de-escalate, and then mental health identification, something start to understand what's going on with them that we serve on a daily basis. I think that'll be very important for how to do the work that they're doing and with the understanding instead of automatically holding people accountable for something that they probably can't be held accountable for. Different things like that. So
Those
we
two really
understand.
go hand in hand.
This is
Yeah.
all while we're still serving everybody on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll jump right into shelter staff. In the month of March, we've hired 18 new staff. That's a large growth rate for an organization to handle. It still is March. And so we've hired a deputy director, as you met, Kim. We've hired a kitchen manager. He goes by Chef Mo. He's starting to cook on a daily basis. Some of the positions that we need to fill will be 2 full-time kitchen assistant chefs to handle the load that we're anticipating with the village. And I'll talk about where the village is and how many guests we've taken on. We've hired a village community manager. We had someone that we made an offer to. They took maybe a week or two and then declined right before the opening of the village. Then we interviewed somebody else that was well known in the community, and she accepted the position, and she'll start on the 5th of April, maybe. Yeah, she'll start 4 or 5. And she's wonderful. I'll mention her name. The announcement's been out. It's Juniper Gapitz. She's great. And she's working for Bird Nash right now. We've hired an administrative assistant. I've talked a little bit about her. We've hired 7 relief DSAs. That's to help fill in positions at the shelter. And we're also doing some cross training, so some of our relief can go over to the village and help out when needed. We've hired 4 village DSAs, 2 shelter DSAs, and 1 security monitor, and that's for the village. The staff at the village look like, we're short 2 full-time staff for the village. I'll just move right into the village and go back to the demographics for the shelter. We currently have 24 guests living at the village right now. We had 8 scheduled to move in by, I think, today was the last stage of 4 stages of move-ins, and we've had no contact with 8 people so far, or they no-showed. We had 3 actually decline to move to the village, and we have 1 that moved in on day 1 and was subsequently exited for multiple violations, and that happened this week. So the staffing pattern for the village looks like 1 village community manager. We have 3 full-time day DSAs. We have 3 evening DSAs. We have 2 overnight DSAs, and we have 1 security monitor. We need 1 more security monitor to fulfill that security position for overnights. We have 1 full-time case manager, and we still need 1 more case manager. We hired for those 2 positions. We should be fully staffed at the village. In order to fill in for the staffing at the village, we've had some of our regular DSAs at the shelter picking up shifts to cover that. So we've been doing pretty good with our coverage at the shelter. At the village.
James, could you go back for just a second?
Sure.
So now you were saying we've got 25 current residents?
24.
24, okay. And remind me again, is it 50? Or 45?
50 is the number of
Okay.
cabinets we have. So what we had 8 that were scheduled to come in on one of the 4 days to move in. We had 2 days last week that we staggered the entry date. We gave people about 3 days to move in, get situated before we had another group come in. And of those 4 dates, yesterday was the last date of those 4. And we've had 8 people that we couldn't either contact or didn't show up to move with their case managers. And so they did not go to the village. They're still pending because we haven't had contact. They can still come in. Right now we have 7 guests in the interview process, meaning they've expressed interest in coming to the village. And we're, in the process of meeting with, the case manager to start that interview process. We're also getting referrals, daily for individuals to move into the shelter. And we're staying with the process of doing an interview with the case manager. And then we'll, subsequently make a decision based on her interviewing them to see if they meet the criteria to move into the village. So logistically, at the village, I think things are going, I think they're going better than I expected, not as many issues. Some of the issues that we're seeing are we had a shelter that was clogged. We thought it was clogged, and it was an electric pump that, was inactive, and we've had somebody come out to kind of fix that in one of the shelters. Other than that, everything's been going pretty smooth. The overall reaction from our guests is positive. We're still figuring out the food situation. Right now, we have one kitchen manager. We have an assistant, person in the kitchen, and he's delivering the meals, twice a day. And we're trying to bring the meals earlier in the day for dinner. So logistically, we're trying to figure that out. We'll get there. We're looking for more kitchen equipment, like a warmer, so we can keep the meals hot until they have to transport. So we're trying to figure out a way to do that. We're hiring more equipment at the time. We bought a nice tilt skillet from a wonderful community person, and it was Chuck. And we had drains installed, electric plugs installed. And now we have to get it through the door and get it into the kitchen. That tilt skillet will maximize the ability to cook food in a short amount of time. So we'll pull back on our kitchen manager. He's been working really hard. He does a great job. Yeah. So that's one.
What's a tilt skillet? Is it like a big?
It's big, and yeah, when James is talking about figuring out how to get it in the door, it's heavy. We delivered it out there, and yeah, it's a
So
big deal.
if you imagine making spaghetti, you could probably make a lot of spaghetti at one time in this tilt skillet.
Yeah, probably 200 people.
Yeah, on one tilt skillet. So just think of how that maximizes instead of having to do different pans and stack them and then store them to keep warm. It's great. Eggs, just think about how many scrambled eggs you make for anybody got. I'm
Getting excited?
No,
Your
I
kids.
know what's coming. I know what's coming.
Yeah.
You know, once we have the capacity at the shelter to where contractually we meet our obligations to do that. One of the things, and I said this before and I said it earlier, maybe my first meeting here, this is only my third one, is that winter emergency shelter showed me everything that we were doing right and everything we weren't. And so by the next time we have that many people in the building, we'll be ready. We'll be ready for it.
Yeah, you started
Some of the things we're working at.
kind of opportune time to learn a lot.
Yeah.
James, quick question. You got 24 people right now
Mhm.
in the village. Where did most of those come from?
It's a mix. The first two entry dates was the 18th and I believe the 25th of last week. They came from some of the camps on the north side, closing. They were either in the camps or they were referrals from Bert Nash and the city. So if they didn't come from that camp, they came from encampments around the city.
They still had to meet the.
Yeah, when we interviewed,
Yeah.
we did a mass interview at Jubilee, and
Right.
that's where a lot of those folks were interviewed at, and we made some of the decisions. That was about a month before we opened.
That was, February, like 9,
We opened on the 18th this month.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And now, when you're talking about interviewing and there is a commitment to, and refresh my memory on this, commitment to the neighborhood that says the guests at Pallet Village will meet, I'm trying to remember, no sex offender or violent offender, what, there were some restrictions that were being promised to the neighborhood from what I recall. And is that coming from the city? Is that whose commitment is that, I guess, ultimately?
It's a contract, where it's contract, in our contract, is that what will happen? The contract reads, we will follow the, Pallet Village Manual, that was developed when I signed on, it was already written. And so in there, it talks about, the population that will inhabit the village. And so it's our most vulnerable population, no behavioral concerns as far as violent crimes and things of that nature. It'd be our veterans, victims of domestic violence, elderly,
To some degree disabled.
yeah, some
Yeah,
disabled.
yeah.
But one thing that the village is not supportive housing. It's a version of being able to provide support, but it's more, our guests are self-sufficient. They live independent. We encourage independent living, to whatever extent they can, and we just provide support for them. We have a case manager on staff, to help with issues that we help people with, and then we help connect with community organizations. A lot of our guests that are coming now have case managers, either through LCS, Burton Nash. They have case management, and that's how they were referred. So that's what we're seeing now. So we are meeting that commitment to the neighborhood.
And right now, we're delivering 2 meals a day.
Three.
We are delivering 3.
We are doing 3. On the days, well, Salvation Army, this is only the second week. I talked to, I can't think of his name, Lieutenant. I'm meeting with him again this next week, and we're gonna talk about how we can collaborate. He said he can commit to bringing the truck over there on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, unless there was some reason he couldn't, then he would let me know. So that's helping us do that, and that's wonderful. Our guests still get up and come to Jubilee. They still do all the things they do in the community, and we encourage that. So that's been going on. I think that's really wonderful. When I get there in the morning, some of our guests have already gone. Then they come back and
I have seen a decline in numbers, and I'm attributing it to more meals
okay.
being served in both the Lawrence Community Shelter and also now with Village. So actually, my numbers have gone down, from like, about 20,
Okay.
On average. So, I feel like that's a good thing, because that tells me that where they're at, they're getting a meal there and don't need to make the trip either by bus or walking, don't need to make that trip. But anyhow.
One of the things that we've talked about, one is installing a comment box or a place where we can take comments from the guests that want to do it anonymously. I recognize that might be a better way for some to do that, but we're looking at reestablishing our curfew. That's been the biggest deterrent to coming to the village, is the 7 o'clock curfew. And so, in consultation with our village community manager, we were going to discuss maybe a winter and summer curfew. With the time change and the light being outside, it makes sense. And so we're looking at changing the curfew from 7 to possibly 9. And then maybe something even different on the weekend. We encourage people that it's not that you cannot be out after 7, it's just that you have to schedule that with the case manager. And I encourage people to talk to the case manager and say, I need to do this. And it's almost like it's okay. So that's been some of the transition differences for people coming in from unstructured sanctioned living to structured, shelter. We are still a community, it's still an emergency shelter, and there are rules. It's not a low barrier shelter. So there are ways to get in. So I think that's some of that transition, is what we're going through. I think some of the expectations of some of our community members have been that it was gonna be low barrier and those type of things, and it's not low barrier. It's not supported in the model for some of the other projects you see.
I know we were early in the process with this, but had talked about the idea of having guests involved and active in projects within the village and things of that sort. Is there a format to move that direction for, volunteer work?
Yeah. One of the first projects that we're gonna work on is, we have, volunteers scheduled to come in and paint the community building. We've also got I can't think of the artist's name, but there's a muralist, you know what I'm saying? That wants to come in and possibly do murals, and I think, yeah,
It's so local.
yeah. And so, but having seen the mural in the dining room when I started, I want to preview murals. And so, yeah, but that's something that we want to do, but we do have a group that wants to come in and paint the community center. We're thinking about basketball goals or tetherball or something like that. We've already purchased, carports. So out there on the outside, there's no shade, and we know how Kansas sun is. So we purchased 3 carports, one that's gonna go in front of the community center that's kind of a larger, maybe a double carport. And 2 of them are gonna be for the designated smoking areas on the perimeter of the camp. And so those things are happening. We've had some interest in guests wanting to plant flowers. They asked me where. I said, wherever you want to plant flowers, it's fine with me. And so I have a contact person that I'm going to call to see if we can get someone to come over and help provide flowers and things like that. It's only a week 2, but we are starting to do some of those things. We're starting to identify, maybe I'm sitting down with our volunteer coordinator to kind of identify some of the projects we can do. As far as the neighborhood community, I've been to the Wood Creek Neighborhood Association earlier this month, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And they were really happy to hear some of the things that we're doing at the village. I think there was a lot of heightened anxiety about the opening of the village, and I kind of went over the rules and some of the expectations and told them that we would be living up to those expectations. I actually gave everybody my number. If you had some concerns, just call me, talk about it. And one of the things we're gonna do with the next meeting, the village manager is gonna attend the next meeting, and I've talked to some of the guests that would like to attend, so they can start to get to meet some of our guests. And just see who we're serving and get to know them.
Let me just make sure I understand that. So the neighborhood association is inviting them into their meetings?
Sure.
All right, that's great.
And we talked about, we're neighbors. When I came into, it was actually over across the hall. And when I walked in, they say, oh, this is for Wood Creek neighbors. I said, I live in Wood Creek, I'm a neighbor.
Pinckney, right?
The Pinckney is the big, Wood Creek is right across the street. That's yeah. And so that's the first one I went to.
Okay.
And so there's multiple different ones.
Okay.
I guess I can go ahead and segue into some of the things we're starting to work on are establishing, I think it's called Good Neighbor program around the main shelter, is to start working with the neighborhood to reestablish a neighborhood meeting to let folks know who we are and we get to know our neighbors. We're gonna reinstitute that, and we're also gonna do a new one for, that was for anybody that wanted to come and talk about shelter, but we have to go out and meet the neighborhood associations in that area. I know I talked to the city, and that's one of the things that's in our contract is that we would do it. So I'm gonna start to fulfill that. That's how I'm gonna pass off some of the things I've been doing to Kim, and then I'm gonna start doing some of those other things. We talked about, excuse me, donor relations. One of the things I'm going to institute are those donor letters that say thank you. What I'm going to start putting in the donor letters is some of the outcomes that we're going through. Your donation has helped us do A, B, and C. Might even include some pictures, and it'll change monthly. Monthly basis, we'll give an update on some of the outcomes of the shelter, what we're doing. Maybe some pictures of some of the upgrades that we're doing, just some of those things. I think it's important that people see the things we're doing instead of just saying thank you. That's one thing, but if they can actually start to see maybe your donations have gone to serving 40 guests in our continuous day program, and 3 of those exited to rental property and things like that. So we're going to come up with some innovative ways to kind of give a report out on a monthly basis to our donors. We're going to start working on fundraising. I think somebody mentioned to me chocolate and tea.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I filled a box of chocolate and tea, but I didn't know what to do.
I've been to that before.
And I'm new to that. We'll talk about that. We'll look at that and we'll start to develop some ideas about how to do some fundraising. I think that's really important. I know it's really important. So that's some of the things that are on my schedule to start doing. Next week, we're meeting with the Lawrence Police Department. I'm gonna sit and talk to the chief and Major. But we're gonna talk about developing a city ID program to help individuals that have lost their ID to get some ID. And not only get state ID, but to use a city ID that might be used to gain employment in the city, and to start getting state ID and things like that. So that's one of the things that we're gonna start working on doing. They're open to it, I'm open to it. So we're gonna sit down and try to do that. We'll talk about that next week. I think we're meeting on Monday. Any questions about the village or anything so far?
Not specifically about the village, but I do have a random question. I've been aware of a situation of people being discharged from the hospital. I was under the impression that there was transportation between the hospital and LCS if someone was discharged. Is that happening still?
I'm not aware of that. We don't provide
Okay.
transportation. There might be, one of the things I know that we do have are a lot of volunteers that transport on Sundays. They come onto the shelter, whenever, exits happen, and they take people from the shelter to downtown. And they do that, they make round trips until everybody is satisfied.
That's really based around Link on Sundays. That's lunch that's being served at the First Christian Church from like 11 to 1.
Okay.
And on Sundays, because there's no bus service,
Mhm.
so the director of Link took it upon herself to put together volunteers and vehicles
Right.
to do that thing. But the driver there was that meal that's being served on Sunday afternoons, and the folks at the shelter couldn't get it.
Right.
They got an SUV they'd like to donate, by the way.
You'll take it?
Between them and Dare, they could really use them.
No, I knew the city had been talking about establishing Sunday scheduling, right? Was that
I think there was some talk and.
There
I'm
is.
Completely out of turn, but I don't think it's happened yet.
No, it has,
It has?
yeah. It's the micro transit. So you have to call and get
Yeah,
scheduled.
well, I know that had been established, Chuck. you
That's
may
the-
have been
that's-
referring
that's
to
the
something
Sunday
in addition
service.
to that.
Well, yeah, I didn't know if it was fixed route or if it was,
Not fixed route,
okay.
yeah, it'll
Yeah,
make,
that
So
was
it's like,
better
it's like
than
on
that.
demand,
right,
it's on demand. You have to schedule in advance. A lot of our guests use that on Sundays or after hours, to go to work.
And it's working.
What? They say you might wanna plan a half hour ahead of time so you're not late. Somebody just told me that, yesterday.
Well, that's an improvement, because
Yeah.
it was take about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So one time.
all right, you wanna go to your
Demographic
demographic report?
reports,
But before we do that, Jane, real quick, what are the numbers at the shelter looking like today in the various categories? The daytime numbers and the 90-day numbers.
as far as
The number of people,
every day,
yeah.
or just, right,
Average
average?
through the month, yeah.
I have what we had, I'm gonna do the February.
Is that in?
Yeah, this is just the February number, I mean,
If you're gonna talk about it,
Yeah,
then we'll go.
I'll start with our night by night guests, for the month of February. We averaged, we had 221 unique individuals in the month of February.
Do I have the right report up?
Excuse me?
Do I have the right report up? Okay,
You know, you do, I don't.
I see 189, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, you do, I have the wrong one, okay, yeah, you got it right.
Okay, we got somebody under 5 up there?
That's probably not, that's not correct.
Okay.
Oh, report, where you at? So we had 189 individuals, for the month of February. When you said somebody 5, you see that 5?
Yeah.
That's no answer. That's how many people did not give their age.
No, it's 1. It's showing 1.
Oh, 1? That's
Yeah.
gotta be a typo.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's fine. And I just was like, ooh, that's different.
No, we do not.
And so, do you want me to go through every category and talk about the difference, or anybody have any questions about any of the categories?
You don't need to read us the report.
Yeah, I mean,
I
just
think we're
something,
good.
anything stick out? I know last month we talked about, disparities.
It looks pretty much, it stays significant, well, it stayed consistent.
Consistent,
Right. The night by night, there's a 22.2% who identifies Black, but 7.5% identifies American Indian Indigenous.
Right.
So that's consistent from last month as well. What I am curious about, and I know we had talked about low barrier, no barrier, we had talked about, what we were doing as far as intervention for people who are coming in with use of substance abuse.
Mhm.
And so I'm really happy that the health department has taken inventory agency and coming there monthly. That's a good direction for us. It puts me to feeling that there is community health that is integrated into this place too. I'm curious about what we will learn, and I know it's only been a month since we've had the mobile van unit come in. But I'm curious about what we'll collect, or if we will collect, if this is going to influence what we know about people who either self-identify or who do not disclose, who are night by night or who are staying there for, I think, maybe ES means what?
Emergency shelter.
Emergency shelter, okay.
That's our continuous.
Okay, I wonder if, I have a couple of questions, this is all self-identified information. With the significance of there being a intervention as far as providing healthcare, maybe some behavioral health, maybe also some medications, I'm not sure about how and what the mobile van unit can do. Maybe Charlie can answer a little bit to that. But will that be reflected on, the report at all as far as the, emergency state? Or we're just keeping this to being self-identified statistics and data? Will we be able to say, for example, and I know this is getting into some of these, what is that called, where you cannot, identify, yeah, but it's another medical term for that, or we.
HIPAA.
Thank you. But will that be something that we will have a little bit more understanding about as we are doing and developing, what is a medical system or a care system on site?
You know, not from the shelter. We don't provide the services. The only data we could probably give you was aggregate numbers of how many people attended the clinic or sought those services.
Right.
But as far as a breakdown of the services received, we don't ask people what they're doing there, you know, so but that would be up to the health department to provide those type of breakdowns.
Yeah, and as we should not.
So
No,
we can
neither
tell
are
you, they might be able to give you a report on how many immunizations they provided.
Right.
Just speaking to that, one of the guests, I talked to her and she talked about after the last meeting, I gave these reports and she talked about how she felt it causes a stigma for them to see how many people have some of the disabilities or some of the diseases. And I talked about, and I said that I understand that, but I can give you those reports in the whole city. Those stats are public information, and if you wanted to know that, and she said, it's not about that, it's just about, we're already stigmatized about being homeless, and now they can see something else about us. And so, I understand what she's saying. That's something that we all have to take into account. We're talking about people. We need to do it.
Jill's got her hand raised, I'd like to let her.
Yeah, I
So-
just wanted to say I appreciate Christina's questions because I think those are questions that we have a work group that comes out of the development of the strategic plan, A Place for Everyone, because this providing access to medical care was an identified need that came from our neighbors with lived experience. And we know that in other communities, an effective outreach strategy is to bring services where we know folks are. And so what the health department is doing, but also, and maybe Liz can talk about the partnership that Heartland Health is leading along with LMH, and John's been involved in that too with Jubilee Cafe. We're trying to bring medical services to where folks are and track what we're seeing and iterate and reflect as a work group. So we have a regular work group that meets. James is a part of that. We meet once a month and we're just, again, like evaluating what progress we've made. How do we iterate? How can we reflect? And then try to better understand what do we need in the future to sustain whatever service it is. But for now, we're collaborating, getting all those partners together to provide medical care as an outreach tool. Because we think that is what is going to be a way to engage with folks. But also it's also just the right thing to do when you have a facility like with LCS. So I hope we have more information to share, but I just wanted to make sure I shared with you, Christina, and the other board members that that's an active work group and we can keep sharing information. Yeah.
And in partnership with Wednesdays, we've got a community health worker that's been going out with the health department. And, you know, I can speak on behalf of Heartland and some of the experiences and trends that we're seeing. Last year, we served 319 individuals experiencing homelessness in our clinic. So working a lot with organizations like Bert Nash and Artists Helping the Homeless, who are helping bridge that transportation barrier, just getting into our clinic. So there's a lot of work done in this space that might not be connected here in this, charts that, when appropriate, I think we can share some of that information and some of the trends that we're seeing. One component is the work that we're doing with medical assisted substance use treatment. Our MAT program's a pretty significant part of that conversation as well. So.
And I was going to also offer that another resource that's been deployed in the community as of late that is really having a high level of engagement with this population at a community level is the mobile integrated health team that was launched earlier this year through Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical with funding from the county and the city. That team is really interested in becoming more included in engaging with this population and being a good partner. So I think we can tee up a really great conversation for the board, maybe at a future meeting.
Thank you, Jill.
So just coming back, I think, question that John had posed. So the data that we've got here is saying that we've got roughly 40 people on the extended stay in February,
Mhm.
and then that 189 on the night by night.
Right.
But do we have information that says, on average, through the course of any given week or, per day or anything like that, what are the number of people that we're housing at LCS, on a nightly basis? I think this, with our contract with the city, we're supposed to be providing 120, and then,
We're supposed to have available 125 beds.
okay,
They're available. You wanna know if we met that goal or how many we're serving of
Like,
that?
what's the average census? Daily census? I think that's what you're asking.
I can,
I don't know, it's around 80, because that's the thing that says it's numbers.
right now, it's 80 night by night, average between 70 and 80. I can give you numbers about it. But then our continuous stay, we have at least 31 total. With the transition of people going from the shelter to the village, we're actually adding more people, not more people, but different people. And so we're expanding who we serve, where we serve people by adding more people to continuous stay. But I think that's a plus. Once we finish a lot of the renovations, we're gonna increase the amount of people in continuous stay. So the amount of people that have to leave will increase, that don't have to leave will increase. So that's what we're doing. But I've said this at every meeting so far. We're trying to increase the amount of restrooms to be able to do that humanely. That's our biggest thing. I was just asked by somebody if we could put porta potties outside while they wait in line. And I was like, I don't think we could. And then the more I talked, the more I said, well, maybe I'll think about that. It's just that people don't have enough time to use the restroom, and when you get there, they have to wait in line to get in. And we're working a lot of things out. Logistically, we're doing a lot of different things. We're finding out so many things that there's never a lack of things to do, and we're starting to kind of see our way to how we're gonna change a lot of these systems and what we're gonna do. So there's a lot of things in progress right now.
On the demographic reports, will you have that also for the village?
Yeah, and I submitted a request to the Kansas Story Homeless Coalition to add that as a program. And I thought it was gonna be added within a week, but it's not added yet. And so once they add that, we start putting the data in, and we can get the data out.
Okay.
And so we're doing the intake and we're collecting all the data. But we just can't pull it out, glean it out to a report like this until we're able to.
And then same with the 30-day program?
Yeah, every program that we do, we'll be able to do that.
Okay, any other things you want to report on tonight?
Just on our 90-day program, out of the 40 guests that we have, 7 of those exited in the month of February, 3 exited to housing, and they were rental by themselves. They were able to find a rental property. They exited housing, and 4 were exited to night by night. So it should have been 90 days, and that could have been for some of them, for whatever reason, maybe rule violations and things like that. And so we're working at, one of the things I will say about the shelter is, we're having to look at what low barrier means and how do we address that. There are some practices that we're starting to look at that, when it comes to low barrier, about the drugs and alcohol that come to the shelter. And how do we deter that from happening? There are some options that I'm going to be looking into, maybe doing some amnesty boxes. I know that the shelter has previously done different things to kind of do a more, humane way of doing that. And I think the best way to probably do that would be to have amnesty boxes outside of the shelter. And so things don't get into the shelter that help. And so we don't have to come into possession of those things. And I think right now we're coming into possession of some of those things, and we probably shouldn't be. So it's a work in progress.
I think that's another training opportunity for our staff as well, just on how to handle drug and alcohol that's coming in, understanding the drug and alcohol and addiction issues, so.
One question just to, and I'm totally not, this is not something maybe we can answer, but I would like if there is a possibility to collect this data. Because as I see about the number of clients whose prior living situations included jail, prison, or juvenile detention facility, we've got 9 who identified in the month of February that was where they lived prior. And 0 that are emergency shelter guests, so I imagine they've been here for a longer time and they didn't come from jail or prison. I'm specifically honing in on the incarcerated folks right here. I'm curious about the number, the night by night, and if once they are exited from the night by night program and will they re-engage in the Lawrence Community Facility or the correctional facility? And then I just wanna know if there's a bounce back. Like,
You want the recidivism rate.
I wanna see that. If there, and I know that gives them, that's what I'm saying, we may not be the people who collect that data. But it's really important to me because that would be what I would understand the next home or the emergency shelter for those who are needing some. And I just wanna know if there's a kind of a connection between that.
We are starting to work closer with our reentry program. We just got a request. I went over and visited reentry, I think it was in March. Seems like it was a long time ago, but it was in March. They want to come and visit the shelter, and we're going to start to work collaboratively. One of the things I could ask them is that if they could ask the question, were you in the shelter before? We could start to see and when. All we need is a correlation between were you in the shelter and what date and when were they reincarcerated. So that could happen if we develop a relationship where somebody can ask those questions. And we could also ask the question, when was the last, were you in the jail? When was the last time you were incarcerated in Lawrence jail? And so we could do some correlation like that. So that's all possible.
Okay.
We just have to develop a way to ask those questions and add them on. It would be hard to do it at this point because that's HMIS. We don't have
Right.
access to add a question there. That's something we probably could look at, maybe collecting that data.
I would find that to be interesting. I may be the only
Yeah.
one here, but I.
No,
feel
no,
like
no,
that
it's-
would be interesting for me to know. That's
Okay.
where, what is the expectation that they'll be incarcerated and then leaving incarceration, have to be sheltered and then, back and forth in that vicious cycle. So I just kind of would like to know more about.
Working with the city and Misty's on here, Misty already developed one survey to kind of ask the questions that we don't have answers to about how long people have been homeless, where they lived before they were here. And so we can do another round of surveys and start asking some of those questions to get that data, because that is good data, to kind of see some of those coalitions. And if we can interject some relational something on one side of that, we could probably change.
Yeah,
So that's always good to do.
okay. Well, thank you for considering that. I think
Oh, yeah,
that'd be
that's
good information
what
to
we do.
gather.
That's what.
Well, I think it's good information for us,
Yeah.
developing programs.
Yeah, I think it's along those lines, just a question of what number of times is Douglas County Jail releasing people to the streets? You know, versus having someplace that would be home and sheltered. I mean, I guess we're somewhere in one of those contracts, we're supposed to provide 2 beds or something
We
like
do,
that.
we provide 2 beds of reentry, and what we do is allow, instead of, just being released to nowhere to go, it says we give them 3 days at the shelter, and then they're able to do what they need. So a lot of times, some of our guests are evaluated for continuous stay, preferentially, because as long as we can continue a positive, release, and then they're welcome to stay in a 90-day program if we have the rule with those type of things. So we are starting to do some. It's really important.
All right.
And Charlie, I don't know if you can see the Jill's letter again. I'm not sure if that was in the last question.
I think
but-
Yeah,
just,
I'm sorry, I lowered it and then I did want to add a little bit to what Chuck was asking, if that's okay.
yeah, go ahead.
In addition to that, part of our contract to provide, the set asides of shelter beds to work with reentry case management. The Douglas County, for almost 5 years, we've had a funding partnership with Artists Helping the Homeless, where individuals that are identified as having a history of homelessness, substance use disorder, and or in combination with a severe and persistent mental illness are identified by jail staff, depending on when they're going to be released. They meet with Artists Helping the Homeless, and it's all males right now. We hope to expand to females in the future, but they released, if they're a good fit, they release to the First Step House, which is called Kairos House. If you haven't been, it's fantastic. It's in West Lawrence. We can accommodate up to 8 people at one time. And when I say we, because the county funds all of that contract, including additional support for the Step Down House, which is called Meraki House, which is also it's kind of it's more on the southwest side of town, or excuse me, northwest side of town. Wraparound services, transportation, and it's all peer led. And the folks that are a part of that program are giving back directly to the community and engaging and partnering on all the different projects that Misty's engaged in as well. So I just want to make sure that I'm sharing that we are trying our best not to directly release people to the streets, and our reentry department works closely with the continuum of care partners to identify folks that we can get set up for housing as soon as possible if they're not a good fit for that Artists Helping the Harmless program, or there isn't space for them, or they don't want to go to LCS. We have options for them, and we're trying to do our best that we're not releasing folks, and we're giving them options.
Thanks, Jill, for adding in that additional information about reentry program. Okay, well, we have about 16 minutes left, and this almost kind of happened to us last time. We didn't have a lot of time for the committee reports. So I think we have time for that tonight. If the operations committee wants to, did you have
Yes,
one
I've
more?
got one more question,
Alright.
and unfortunately, I should have posed this before Sharon
Shannon,
left, but so explain to me again the proposal that's coming next month to take the $100,000 from what had been allocated for the shelter and moving it into the real estate survey.
James, you gonna help out with
It's
that?
not actually a real estate survey, it's a housing study.
The COVID related, yeah.
Yeah, it's a housing study. The money that was obligated, CDBG CB money was allocated to Lawrence Community Shelter, and I forget the exact dollar amount. But it wasn't used. And I think it's been hanging there for 2 years now.
Well, I mean, I think the amount that was listed on the agenda was saying 100,000.
That's what's gonna be diverted from that original fund to the housing study.
Okay.
In doing that, there is additional CDBG money that's gonna compensate for that 100,000 to be provided for other, improvements or, updates that we want to do at the shelter. So we're gonna be able to, apply for that funding in lieu of that 100,000. It'll actually be, I can't think of the numbers right now, but I think additionally, I think there's an additional 200 and something thousand for regular CDBG that will go to the rest of the CV funds, and it'll be an extra 50,000, minus that $100,000. It'd be more than it would be with that $100,000. The reason that, was explained to me to do that the CDBG CV funds are limited to COVID-related expenses and changes. The regular CDBG money would be able to do things that are not COVID-related. One of the things, that I was told by the city is that, construction projects are something that could be done with CDBG money. And I have a lot of ideas about construction projects. So some of the money will be used to, do the new pallet, at the shelter, to construct a building that houses the restrooms, showers, and that facility, because we don't have enough showers in the building. It doesn't make sense to have 35 people from outside go in the building. So we're gonna do that and put offices there, restroom, not in the same building, but in the same area. Some of that money will be used to renovate another area of restrooms in our building, to go from one toilet and one urinal and one toilet to maybe 4 toilets and 4 showers. There are no showers in the warehouse now, where we house over 50 people every night. There's toilets, but there's no showers. So people have to get on the list to take showers if they want to shower at night. And everybody's not able to take a shower because there's not enough time and not enough showers. We need to, the way the warehouse is built, you can't just add a second floor. You have to add a platform inside of the building to be a second floor, you know. Right? And so we're looking at doing that because we don't have any storage space. None. And we need storage space. That's why we spent, well, Kim has, this last couple of weeks, spent a lot of time looking at things that haven't been touched in years. We're just getting rid of them.
We're getting a volunteer group that's gonna come every Saturday. And then we'll start meeting with them, not this weekend, but next, to try to kind of set up pods for move out and I guess revamp some of the storage unit or areas that we do have to allow for best use of that space. So we have some plans for what we have, but we do not have enough storage.
Part of that original plan for the CDBG CV funds was to do HVAC, to put ceilings in, what was it to do to change the airflow so it would be less conducive to diseases, to keep the airflow, and to actually have a better use for HVAC. HVAC, we're heating a building that most of that building is uninhabited. And we're trying to heat the whole building to keep a few of us warm or cool. And we need to put ceilings in and things like that. So I think that's the original, that was the bulk of that money about for that. I still, we submitted that as one of the proposals also.
Now, any update? I know that there's been discussion at the State House of the one-time funding that was originally $40 million, and now it's been cut to 20 million, I believe, and then there's a lot of restrictions that are being placed on it, but
did that bill get killed?
that, I'm gonna say it's probably like House Bill 2573 or something like that, and
I think the House bill didn't go, and I think the Senate introduced the amendment bill,
okay.
but I don't think that made it, did it? Because it was supposed to go yesterday or today. I was thinking.
I wouldn't, I knew that they had kind of layered a bunch of amendments onto the original, and then it seemed like it died in committee.
Yeah.
It's adjourned till next Monday.
Thanks, Misty.
I don't have a lot of, well, politics are unpredictable, but
You don't see that, we're not gonna have much
I'm
opportunity.
gonna provide services, no matter what people do, we're gonna do the best we can to provide services.
All right, anything else for the ED report? Okay, so we have 9 minutes left. We could try to keep the committee reports, to a few minutes. Hopefully we can get through this.
We can really keep it very short.
I think ours was just given.
Oh, okay. So the exec committee is talking a little bit about, we're gonna do a 6-month evaluation of James. But the 6-month evaluation might also be a good time for us to consider, yours is the ad hoc committee. And now that things are
Yeah.
moving along, it was kind of like,
Well,
that'd be a good time to
when we
pause.
first started that, there was all this
Right,
stuff and including James coming on, he
Right.
hadn't yet, there, operationally, there was a lot of question marks.
Right.
There's not as many question marks as there used to be in large part because we hear, operationally, what has taken place in the last month. I mean, for the most part, those would have been the kind of questions we would have been interested in
Mhm.
asking, and, I mean, that's how I feel about it.
Well, as an ad hoc committee, if you guys decide you feel like you've done your piece during your period, I think just let us all know.
Well, the one, I
Yeah,
guess I keep
comment.
advocating and trying to make sure we've got awareness in terms of severe weather concerns both at LCS and at Pallet, and we're vulnerable in both of those locations, and James and I have talked about the unlikely scenario of actually building a safe
shelter.
at either location, really.
Yeah.
So it needs to be more of a procedural and response situation.
I think we're prohibited from doing that at the village because of where it's at. And the use of that land is for temporary shelter.
Yeah.
To build something in the ground to understand what we're talking about will be more permanent, so I don't think that's it. I can tell you the cabins are rated at 150 miles per hour. That's what they're rated at. It won't sustain a direct tornado, but it might sustain some of the high winds. I don't know what would sustain a direct tornado. That's good to know,
Okay,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, I mean, we could talk about quarterly meetings, or if I even something that we wanted to have established, if I think of, to continue having James as part of those operations meetings, or our new, person who came in, so sorry.
Kim.
Yeah.
Right, well, I'm thinking of your title and, you being deputy director, those meetings as well, I think would be sufficient, to talk about going forward.
okay. Anything else? All right, advisory committee.
So we have 8 new applicants since we have last had a discussion. And just from a logistics standpoint, are we still approving all of those advisory board members, or do you want any of the current members and James to be a part of that decision-making process?
I think technically, the board has to approve them, but I think we're ready. I mean, whatever you guys are recommending is kind of, I hadn't heard anything, so I just figured you hadn't had anybody, so it's great to hear that you have 8 more. I would say just bring forward a proposal if you wanna call it done for the year, or whatever you're, thinking next steps are. But it'd be great to have a completed, that project to be completed, and then we can start to think about what advice we're looking for. I know I have been curious to help with a response to the county commission's initial comments about our board composition. I'm interested to know, if we were to expand the board, could they facilitate maybe identifying more at-large members or something to that effect? So I think we have to talk about what's the job we're asking of this advisory committee, and James, you might have other ideas about advice for the, shelter operations too. So, but yeah, getting them all officially approved. If you had them right now, I'd say let's do it, but we can queue it up for the next, I can put it on the agenda for April's meeting.
You're muted.
We'll put it on the agenda for the next one because I think Christina and I need to get together and review this next round. And James, you're shared on the applicants too. So if you have any thoughts or considerations, please feel free to include your thoughts and comments on that as well.
All right. Thanks for your continued work on that, Christina and Elizabeth. Are there any items from any board members?
I guess I'd like to hear just a little bit. I know there've been a couple of incidents that have caught some attention in the news the last several weeks, associated with guns and either guests or trespassers, I guess, at the shelter. Are we feeling like we're, are we able to effectively address the question of weapons at the shelter? Or are we needing to enhance things with systems or metal detectors or things of that nature that come into play? Are those items that are of value for us in assuring safety of guests and staff?
Well, one thing, James, I'll recommend, because I know you're meeting with LPD soon. Their active shooter training is really wonderful, and they've been great to work with on the Heartland side. So if your staff hasn't done an active shooter training, I would highly recommend it. And yeah, and that also might be helpful, especially when you're talking about emergency weather, kind of looking at some of your exit procedures, things like that. So recommend that.
Well, excuse me. We've talked about, I met with the shelter managers and we've talked about instituting a random search when people come in with wands and things like that. Anything we do to that effect would be much better than not doing that. The question is, how do we do that in a dignified way? As long as we do not search and ask people to show us what they have, anything gets into our shelter. So it's a risk. And so should we do something? Yes. One of the things that happened with the recent things, I don't know how much I want to say about that, but we were notified of a need to ask somebody to talk to us about what they might have brought into the shelter. We did that, and subsequently with the inquiry of that, the person decided to leave. Does that happen all the time? No. We are looking at ways to do a better job, and that comes with our staff training and us getting to know some of the day-to-day operations, the way it's done with shift work, depending on who's on shift and what shift it is, things are done differently. It feels about the way things are done differently, even though we have policies and procedures, which are some of the things we're identifying and starting to know that we have to make some changes. So things will be changed. Where they're gonna be changed to, I don't know. In order not to create havoc, or we're not gonna make drastic changes. We're gonna make subtle changes, but what we're gonna change is the way we take our job seriously and how we do that. How we
Attention library
interact.
patrons, the time is 7:30 and the library is closing at 8 p.m. We ask any patron needing a library card to come to the accounts desk immediately, since we will start issuing new cards in 15 minutes. Any children or teens needing help calling for a ride home should go to the children's desk now. Thank you.
one of the things that we're starting to help our staff understand is that the more you interact with our guests on a positive manner, the more you're able to identify. And so there's nothing that can be better than that. The more you provide a dignified place for people, the more they want to respect that place. And we're starting to see some of those subtle changes. I can tell you that a lot of ways we find out things are the people that live there tell us. So that's getting better. Everything you mentioned, Chuck, is a concern, and we're starting to address some of those things.
I think training also comes along with that, back to the training issue, is how you ask the question. And that's something that I've been kind of trying to just observe and know where we are with that, and then how to model that possibly different, and then can maybe pair up with somebody that does it very well. I'm not to that point quite yet, but I do think that that's something that I feel, and I hope you do too, but I feel like we need to provide more training or support for our staff on how you ask the question, because it will, I mean, that's part of de-escalation. So,
Well, I have to believe that applies to drugs and alcohol as well as guns and knives and.
yes,
And
and mental health, and whether you're reentry, I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, also, and just kind of just to tail in on, the really fabulous job that you've done, James, and the support that you provided. I also recognize that, having a community that reflects demographics that we are seeing in our Norris Community Shelter, especially knowing that we are servicing, quite a large population of people of color. I mean, we've got a very large amount of what we understand is significant for our American Indian population who are there night by thing. The demographics for the people who work there, the youth population that are helping to support should be in some way reflective of the folks that we are helping to support as well. And I don't know how we design that, other than waiting for applicants to come and then we have that interview process. But I know that you are doing a great job in making sure that there are all crosses of T's and dots of I's. I would hope also that our applications or our job postings go out that say that we really encourage for folks to apply that have a background and a history and demographic that would be helpful to be supportive of the claims there. So yeah, that gets into a whole area about like hiring and staffing, but yeah, it's worth the conversation, maybe not this go around, but maybe in April.
All right, any other board items? All right, our next, what we have on the agenda for April so far will be the consideration of our financial policies and then additional appointments to the advisory committee. Is there anything else anybody would like to put on the agenda?
Maybe the new hires, maybe you're talking about the staff that's now working at the LCS, maybe supporting them, celebrating that, give another of the pilot billing.
Actually, James and I talked about this. There's a lot that's been accomplished in a few months, and it does feel like it's a good time to take a pause and kind of celebrate that. Yeah, I don't know, you did mention it in your ED report.
Well,
You wanna,
I talked to.
are we letting the cat out of the bag?
I think we're gonna sit down and plan that. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But I think, there's a lot of things to consider in order for it to be the best it can be. We have to find the right time to get all of the staff out of the shelter and do something like that. And so it's gonna take some logistics to do that, but I think it's very important to value everyone equally. And sometimes when you have shift work, it doesn't feel like that for everybody. So there has to be a way to do that. It's possible. It's definitely possible. But I'm all for that.
Okay.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, I'll just share that the previous board members on the board before it transitioned had been discussing the possibility of trying to train up ourselves sufficient that we could hold down the fort while staff actually got time away from the work to do training
I think
and
that's a great.
a retreat. And it was like,
John's trying.
you know, I mean, it's one of those like,
I'll help y'all.
how can we figure out a way to, you know, even if there's just a skeleton crew there, but can we find the right volunteers that can just hold things steady while they get a break, can do whatever they need to do, whether, because we were talking about, they don't have much time for training. They don't have much time for, you know, retreats or anything that really would support their development, just. I think that's, yeah, I think that's a great thing we can put on our agenda, just have more discussion about it, figure out how to make that a possibility.
It's definitely possible.
So,
That's actually what we do at the Valor Center, but
yeah,
that exact same thing is how do we get everybody out of the building to go celebrate something when we still have
yeah.
a building, right?
Mhm.
With people in it and whatnot,
Yeah.
and that's how we do it. A little bit different demographic, obviously, but the principle, the principle is the same.
All right, well, then I guess the last item on the agenda is adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, meeting adjourned at 7:37 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Good day.